Chapter 3. It took them 5 minutes to search the cramped room for any spy holes or signs of danger. 5 minutes for them to lift the framed paintings on the wooden-panelled walls, tap the floorboards, seal the gaps between the door and the floor, and cover the windows with Sam's weather-worn black cloak. When she was certain that no one could either hear or see her, Selenia ripped off her hood, untied the mask, and whirled to face him. Sam, seated on his small bed, which seemed more like a cot, raised his palms to her. "Before you bite my head off," he said, keeping his voice quiet, just in case, "let me say that I went into that meeting knowing as little as you." She glared at him, savouring the fresh air on her sticky, sweaty face. "Oh, really?" "You're not the only one who can improvise." Sam kicked off his boots and hoisted himself further onto the bed. "That man's as much in love with himself as you are. The last thing we need is for him to know that he had the upper hand in there." Selenia dug her nails into her palms. "Why would Arobynn send us here without telling us the true reason? Reprimand Rolf for a crime he had nothing to do with. Maybe Rolf was lying about the contents of the letter." She straightened. "That might very well be." "He was not lying about the contents of the letter, Selenia," Sam said. "Why would he bother? He has more important things to do." She grumbled a slew of nasty words and paced, her black boots clunking against the uneven floorboards. Pirate lord indeed. This was the best room he could offer them. She was Ardalan's assassin, the right arm of Oberyn Hamel, not some backstreet harlot. "Regardless, Arobynn has his reasons." Sam stretched out on his bed and closed his eyes. "Slaves," she spat, dragging a hand through her braided hair. Her fingers caught in the plait. "What business does Arobynn have getting involved in the slave trade? We're better than that. We don't need that money." Unless Arobynn was lying. Unless all of his extravagant spending was done with non-existent funds. She'd always assumed that his wealth was bottomless. He'd spent a king's fortune on her upbringing, on her wardrobe alone. Fur, silks, jewels, the weekly cost of just keeping herself looking beautiful. Of course, he'd always made it clear that she was to pay him back. And she'd been giving him a cut of her wages to do so, but Arobynn might want to increase the wealth he already had. If Ben were alive, he wouldn't have stood for it. Ben would have been just as disgusted as she was. Being hired to kill corrupt officials was one thing, but taking prisoners of war, brutalizing them until they stopped fighting back, and sentencing them to a lifetime of slavery. Sam opened an eye. "Are you going to take a bath, or am I going first?" She hurtled her cloak at him. He caught it with a single hand and tossed it to the floor. She said, "I'm going first." "Of course you are." She shot him a dirty look and stormed into the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. Of all the dinners she had ever attended, this was by far the worst. Not because of the company, which was, she grudgingly admitted, somewhat interesting. And not because of the food, which looked and smelled wonderful. But simply because she couldn't eat anything, thanks to that confounded mask. Sam seemed to take second helpings of everything, solely to mock her. Selenia, seated at Rolf's left, half hoped the food was poisoned. Sam had only served himself from the array of meats and stews after watching Rolf eat some for himself. So the likelihood of that wish coming true was rather low. "Mistress Saradothin," Rolf said, his dark brow rising high on his forehead. "You must be famished! Or is my food not pleasing enough for your refined palate?" Beneath the cape and cloak and dark tunic, Selenia was not just famished, but also hot and tired, and thirsty. Which, combined with her temper, usually turned out to be a lethal combination. Of course, they couldn't see any of that. "I'm quite fine," she lied, swirling the water in her goblet. It lapped against the sides, taunting her with every rotation. Selenia stopped. "Maybe if you took your mask off, you might have an easier time eating," Rolf said, taking a bite of roasted duck. "Unless what lies beneath will make us all lose our appetites." The 5 other pirates, all captains of Rolf's fleet, sniggered. "Keep talking like that," Selenia gripped the stem of her goblet, "and I might give you a reason to wear a mask." Sam kicked her under the table, and she kicked him back. A deft blow to his shins, hard enough that he choked on his water. Some of the assembled captains stopped laughing, but Rolf chuckled. She rested her gloved hand atop the stained dining table. The table was freckled with burns and deep gouges. It has clearly seen its fair share of brawls. Didn't Rolf have any taste for luxury? Perhaps he wasn't so well off, if he was resorting to the slave trade. But Arobynn was as rich as the king of Ardalan himself. Rolf flicked his sea-green eyes to Sam, who was frowning yet again. "Have you seen her without the mask?" Sam, to her surprise, grimaced. "Once." He gave her an all-too-believably wary look. "And that was enough." Rolf studied Sam for a heartbeat, then took another bite of his meat. "Well, if you won't show me your face, then perhaps you'll indulge us with a tale of how you exactly became protégé to Arobynn Hamel." "I trained," she said dully, "for years. We aren't all lucky enough to have a magic map inked on our hands. Some of us had to climb to the top." Rolf stiffened, and the other pirates halted their eating. He stared at her, long enough for Selenia to want to squirm, and then set down his fork. Sam leaned a bit closer to her, but she realized only to see better as Rolf laid both of his hands, palms up, on the table. Together, his hands formed a map of their continent. And only that. "This map hasn't moved for 8 years." His voice was a low growl. A chill went down her spine. 8 years. Exactly the time that had passed since the Fae had been banished and executed, when Ardalan had conquered and enslaved the rest of the continent, and magic had disappeared. "Don't think," Rolf continued, withdrawing his hands, "that I haven't had to claw and kill my way as much as you." If he was nearly 30, then he'd probably done even more killing than she had. And from the many scars on his face and hands, it was easy to tell that he had done a lot of clawing. "Good to know we're kindred spirits," she said. If Rolf was already used to getting his hands dirty, then trading slaves wasn't a stretch. But he was a filthy pirate. They were Arobynn Hamel's assassins, educated, wealthy, refined. Slavery was beneath them. Rolf gave her that crooked smile. Do you act like this because it's in your actual nature? Or is it just because you're afraid of dealing with people? I'm the world's greatest assassin. She lifted her chin. I'm not afraid of anyone. Really? Rolf asked. Because I'm the world's greatest pirate, and I'm afraid of a great number of people. That's how I've managed to stay alive for so long. She didn't deign to reply, slave-mongering pig. He shook his head, smiling in exactly the same way she smirked at Sam when she wanted to piss him off. I'm surprised Arobynn hasn't made you check your arrogance, Rolf said. Your companion seems to know when to keep his mouth shut. Sam coughed loudly and leaned forward. How did you become Pirate Lord then? Rolf ran a finger along the deep grooves in the wooden table. I killed every pirate who was better than me. The 3 other captains, all older, all more weathered and far less attractive than him, huffed, but didn't refute it. Anyone arrogant enough to think they couldn't possibly lose to a young man with a patchwork crew and only one ship to his name. But they all fell, one by one. When you get a reputation like that, people tend to flock to you. Rolf glanced between Selenia and Sam. You want my advice? He asked. No. I'd watch your back around Sam. You might be the best, Saradothan, but there's always someone waiting for you to slip. Sam, that traitorous bastard, didn't hide his smirk. The other pirate captains chuckled. Selenia stared hard at Rolf. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She'd eat later, swiping something from the tavern kitchens. You want my advice? He waved a hand, beckoning her to go on. Mind your own business. Rolf gave her a lazy smile. You know what? I don't mind, Rolf, Sam mused, later into the pitch darkness of their room. Selenia, who'd taken first watch, glared towards where his bed lay against the far wall. Of course you don't, she grumbled, relishing the free air on her face. Seated on her bed, she leaned against the wall and picked at the threads of her blanket. He told you to assassinate me. Sam chuckled. It is wise advice. She rolled up the sleeves of her tunic. Even at night, this rotten place was scorching hot. Perhaps it isn't a wise idea for you to go to sleep then. Sam's mattress groaned as he turned over. Oh, come on! You can't take a bit of teasing? Where my life is concerned, no. Sam snorted. Believe me, if I came home without you, Arobynn would skin me alive. Literally. If I'm going to kill you, Selenia, it'll be when I can actually get away with it. She scowled. I appreciate that. She fanned her sweaty face with a hand. She'd sell her soul to a pack of demons for a cool breeze right now. But they had to keep the windows covered, unless she wanted some spying pair of eyes to discover what she looked like. Though, now she thought about it, she'd love to see the look on Rolf's face if he found out the truth. Most already knew that she was a young woman, but if he knew he was dealing with a 16-year-old, his pride might never recover. They'd only be here for 3 nights. They could both go without a little sleep if it meant keeping her identity and their lives safe. Selenia, Sam asked into the dark. Should I be worried about going to sleep? She blinked and then laughed under her breath. At least Sam took her threats somewhat seriously. She wished she could say the same for Rolf. No, she said. Not tonight. Some other night then, he mumbled. Within minutes, he was out. Selenia rested her head against the wooden wall, listening to the sound of his breathing, as the long hours of the night stretched by.